Well, there's a lot of ironies. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, thank you.
Nice to see everybody here talking about global consciousness. I'll tell you an anecdote, then I'll come back to the ironies. Al Gore and John Doerr and a lot of other of the people who are at the forefront of battling against climate change convened a meeting in Aspen earlier this year, and they brought the folks from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and a lot of the scientists who are working on this. And we all went around and asked ourselves what the single most important thing that we could do to help the world battle against climate change. And these were quants. These were nerds, these were scientists, these were not touchy-feely, go around in a circle folks. And in the end, the single most important thing that we could do that everyone agreed upon, and the only thing that would work, was total change in human consciousness. And that, I think, puts the peril and the problem in the same paragraph, using now emerging technologies to deal with these emerging problems is, I think, part of the conversation. And I'm reminded the first time that Vint and I met, we met because I had just started with Stuart Brand something called The Well. And Vint had just invented TCP/IP, and the internet was following, and we were talking back in 1983, 84, a long time ago, before many of you were born. And by the way, that's one of the problems with this panel, is that we don't have any of the people who were born after that up here, because the younger people know more about changing consciousness, I think, than my generation. But I can give you some reflections from that time in my generation, and I'll talk about a couple of people. First, Stuart Brand, and then I'll talk about a fellow named Robert Mueller. And then if we have time, I'll talk about some of the people who were Barack Obama's teachers of community organizing. And I mention them because all of those people had in common that they were on the well. The WELL stands for Whole Earth Electronic Link. It still exists, by the way. It's going strong after 26 years. It's now owned by Salon.com. And the WELL was an idea to use online communities to increase human consciousness, global consciousness, and to have a deep conversation about what was then called deep ecology, and what was then called the anti-war movement, and the women's rights movement, and the movement for gay and lesbian rights, and many of the things that we now think of in our society as a given began as a conversation on the well. Amazon and Sun Computer and eBay all began as conversations on the well, as did many of these high and lofty ideas get vetted and debated on the well. The well was ugly. It was black and white and ASCII. To get on, you had to work at it, 300 baud acoustic modems. We didn't yet have TCP/IP. We didn't yet have the internet, or certainly didn't have the web. But there was such a thirst for communion and community and conversation that some of the finest minds of my generation, at least, found their way to the well. And you can still get on the well and still find all those old conversations, because they were asynchronous, store and forward, using a technology we then called computer conferencing. And every one of those conversations is still there. It's not too late to get into the conversation about whether Nixon should resign or not. You can still get online. And your voice will be heard and stored. Stuart Brand, who was my co-founder, was the person who famously said, after Rusty went up, Rusty Schweikert is one of his best friends, had gone up, he famously said, "Why is it that we, the citizens of planet Earth, have never seen a picture of all of our planet?" And that led him to announce that he was going to do this catalog, which was then called the Whole Earth Catalog, and that we would then do the Whole Earth Electronic Link, this idea of bringing people together in an online way. So in those days, there was, for the first moment, I think, a conflation of the desperate problems society faced with online communities being vetted as one of the sources. And Stewart started a magazine, which very few of you have ever seen probably, called Co-Evolutionary Quarterly, which was a magazine that debated, discussed the role of technology in helping to co-evolve our species with other species living in the world. And it was a real buzz for the time, and it brought a lot of people together thinking about these issues. I don't think that the technology has evolved. I do not think that Twitter is a plus. My son, who's here, is going to initiate me a little further into the depths of Twitter. But, you know, using Facebook as I do...
That's got to be an oxymoron.
The depths
of Twitter.
Well, whether it's IM or TM or SM or Twitter, it's wonderful to say, I am here at this time and meet you. It's not so good to debate the Constitution or the meaning of the Bill of Rights. And that's the issue, is that we've just been through a Luddite 8 years. We've been through an anti-science 8 years. We've been through an anti-conversation 8 years, and we have to change it. And we've seen the beginning of it in the last 2 weeks. We have to find a way to have a conversation about the most important threats that face society, including amongst them the failure of democracy, in a world in which individuals do not know that which they are voting for, the consequences of that which they are about to choose. You have a failure of democracy, as we have market failures. We've just seen the evidence of a huge market failure recently. We need to debate the systems upon which a complex government and a growing population are based. We need to debate an issue of resource scarcity, emerging communicable diseases, climate change, and all the wonderful things that are happening with the new young generation who bring a consciousness to this world that my generation had to inherit as we grew older. There are so many good things that are happening in local communities that are unknown to the greater whole. So we have an opportunity now. And I think online communities are part of that, obviously a small part, I think, of the solution. But thank you for having this this beginning of this conversation, and I look forward to hearing what everybody else has to say.
Steal that back for just a second. I'm imagining for a moment the current administration after January 20th, maybe before, but at least after January 20th. And the question is, can we talk? And the answer is, yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. There is a problem here, and that insofar as our excitement over technology to support this conversation, 5 billion people in the world are not online. A lot of them have mobiles, and so that's a start. Some of those mobiles are internet-enabled. That is helpful. But I have to say, the keyboard on a mobile is not what I would want to use for an in-depth online conversation. It might be cool for Twitter, but that's, you know. Now maybe, you know, the two-thumb bit with this new generation is actually okay for serious conversation, but for me it produces repetitive stress syndrome or something. So we have to deal with that, because the people who are probably the most crucial to solving our problems are in fact often the ones least able to communicate, least aware of the consequences of their action, least able to make choices that would make a difference. So we have a big population to draw into this picture.